Hi everyone, Anne Moundy from Said with Love, and welcome back to week 5 of our Stitch Pink 2024 sew-along of my pattern called A Side of Hearts. And this week it's all about putting your quilt top together, which you might have already done last week, but if you haven't, this is the week to do it. And then we're going to talk through some quilting tips, both some all-over designs as well as then some custom quilting, perhaps some thoughts on if you wanted to try that. It's a reasonably sized quilt, but it's one that you could do through your domestic machine with a little bit of arm muscle, obviously. But it's got some lovely possibilities for some custom quilting, so we'll talk through that as well. And the other thing we're going to talk about today is making the binding. In the pattern, you'll have noticed that I give some vague descriptions about using it for scrappy binding. So I'm going to talk you through a little bit about that as well. So let's get going. So as you can see, the version that I was making with the Heart Ombre Metallics is finished. Well, almost finished. It's not bound. It's quilted. So I decided to do this one in just an all-over design on my long arm using my digital computer quilting. And I've selected a design called Marmalade, which is just some lovely swirls, as you can see, and I'll give you a close-up as well of the quilting. Some swirls and some little circles, but it is a completely non-directional design, so it doesn't matter which way you load your quilt, because if you're not using a wide back, then you're going to have, I think we talked about a vertical seam in your back, and on a long arm, that doesn't go well when you load it with the vertical seam, because you get quite a lump there as you start to roll your quilt. So I practice with this one. This one does have the wide back, but I wanted to practice with it anyway. Isn't that gorgeous? This is the Ombre Confetti Metallic in magenta. And, well, yeah, it might be quite possible that that quilt's going to be on the showing the other side, not this side. Anyway, getting back to, so I practiced loading this on, instead of that being the top, I loaded it as this being the top and did the design that way, and it worked fine. That's why I picked a very non-directional design for my all over. I looked for some things with hearts, but because I was loading it on the side, that made heart patterns. There's a lot of them. Some are multi-directional, but others have quite a, all of the hearts seem to be up the correct way. So I just avoided the whole heart thing. And also, we've got heart fabric. We've got heart designs. I thought quilting hearts on it might be just a step too far. But if you want to go all out, then go for it. Put hearts on your quilt. I just love quilting designs that aren't too dense. I love it when they're sort of just very kind of open and all over the place. It means that the quilt doesn't get particularly stiff, I suppose, from really dense quilting. Now this one, I actually used some new batting for this one. It's from Victoria Textiles here in Australia, and it's actually eucalyptus and wool. And I was hoping that the wool would give it a little bit of loft, a little bit of thickness, but it is a very thin wadding. But it worked well. And that means it's quite a light sort of quilt, which is lovely. It might mean that some of my family that perhaps live in slightly warmer areas might still be able to get a quilt. So that's what I did with the all-over design. Now I'm just going to swap out to the other version that I made using the fairy dust ombre. It's still a quilt top, but I want to talk then about how to perhaps do some of the custom quilting options. I was just about to cover this up with my second version, but I forgot to mention the thread that I used. I always use Aurifil thread, 50 weight, in my quilting, and I decided to use, it's a very pale apricot colour. I'll pop the actual number in the description below. And so when we're up in the sort of peachy, orangey sort of tones, it blended really well. It didn't attract when I came down into the whites. And then when I've come down to these darker colours, the purples down the bottom, it shows, but I think it just looks really lovely. It doesn't sort of stand out and look, really terrible. But I just think it really just then shows the quilting. So you go from sort of not being able to see the quilting because it just sort of blends in to then slowly seeing more and more of the quilting. So I just thought I'd mention that. Okay, so I've just pinned up the quilt top of the second version that I made using the ombre fairy dust. And yes, threads. So I love this version. I love the ombre fairy dust. So I'm going to do some custom quilting on this one. Now, if you've been following me for any length of time, you'll know that I haven't been able to custom quilt for quite some time because of my wrist. But I'm going to give it a go on this one because I think it might be worth it. So, and before I get started on the actual quilting, I want to plan what I'm going to do. It may not be 100% set in concrete what I get to do when I finally get it up on the long arm and start working, because sometimes the quilts talk to me. Should I fess that up on national YouTube? But this is where your colouring chart, you can print that out and do some little drawings to sort of go, okay, if I did this and did that, where's that going to leave me? How do I get to the next bit? Do I do swirls here, or do I do hearts there, or whatever? So the little colouring sheets can really help with that. So my plan is to do some ruler work on the HST blocks, and I'm thinking of doing some triangles as I go across. So, marking out a midpoint, and I'll just do this with an air erasable pen, not a friction pen, nothing like that. I use some lovely air erasable pen from Sewalong, and I'll just put basically sort of some very small dots or a little bit of a line maybe, just to mark that other diagonal, so that when I come here I know where to stop and pivot and go to this next corner. And I'm going to do probably 3, I think, in this size, plus I'm going to do the line down the middle. And on my paper I've actually kind of worked out, if I did the line here and then came back and did my triangle and all the rest of it and then did the other side, that I'm going to go from point A to point B so that I can continue on to do the next HST. Because when you're doing things on your long arm specifically, you need to be thinking about where your path is going, like where you're going to end up when you do this particular bit of quilting, so that you don't have to then constantly be backtracking. It's not the end of the world, but you know me, I'm never going to get the line exactly on the line that I've just quilted. So I much prefer to work out my path better. So that's my plan for that. So that's going to be quite a geometric sort of design. I'm probably going to use some much thicker batting, either perhaps my wool poly mix that I have, which will make it a bit of a warmer quilt, but it'll also give it that extra loft, and you'll see the quilting a bit more. So that's my plan for the HSTs. So that's going to sort of go across the quilt, which will, I think, look quite good. It'll give quite a bit of direction and motion to it. But then we come to the hearts pieces. More threads. So the hearts, I'm going to do stitch in the ditch around the heart just to help make that pop. I really try to get stitch in the ditch, but most of the time it's kind of stitch near the ditch. So I must say, stitch in the ditch is funny. When I very, very first started quilting, not on my long arm, just on my domestic, everybody said, oh, just do stitch in the ditch. It's really easy. And I was like, it is not easy. I think stitch in the ditch is one of the hardest things to get right and to look good. So when I'm doing things on my domestic, maybe a cushion cover or small projects, I really do stitch near the ditch. I do like 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch away, because it's like there's no way my piecing is going to be that perfect that my ditch is going to be the correct. And also if you're flipping where your seams are going, the ditch kind of changes. So yeah, I avoid stitching the ditch most times, but on my long arm with a ruler, it is a little bit easier and I can control things a little bit better. So I'm going to do stitch in the ditch around the heart, and then I'm going to do, this is the bit where I haven't quite 100% decided. I'll print out the heart at the right scale and actually do some drawing with my pencil. I'm either going to do some feathers in here, so some lovely sort of curvy feathers, or using the serpentine stitch, which is sort of more of a sort of like a leaf. It's kind of a curvy leaf shape, I suppose. In the email that goes out for my Sewalong participants, I'll be showing you what these look like. So yeah, I'm thinking maybe the serpentine stitch might fit a bit better. I might be able to get into some of the corners, and I'll do then the repeat on the other side. So it sort of has a bit of a curvy feel to it. And then in the background around the heart, I'm going to do just a little free motion curly heart pattern that I do all the time, except I'll be doing it quite small in here. So it'll be a little heart, and then I'll do a couple of curls, maybe a swirl, then another little heart, and it'll be completely non-directional. But that will be how I get from point A to point B. But I think that's going to make the heart stand out. This is going to be quite dense, so that's going to sort of go into the background quite a bit more. The heart's going to just look swirly and lovely. I'm going to do my ruler work on this. So I think that's going to be a very interesting kind of quilt, and I am really looking forward to trying to do some more custom quilting. As I said, I haven't done it for quite some time, so I'm probably going to be a bit rusty, but I think it'll be worth it. I think this one's going to look really cool. So I don't know whether you guys do custom quilting, or whether you perhaps talk with your long armer about what their suggestions are. I'd love to hear your thoughts about how you're planning to quilt yours. Pop them in the comments below. Now, the very last thing we need to talk about is binding. So the binding for this pattern, there is enough leftover fabrics from making your hearts and your HSTs, if you've followed my cutting instructions, to allow for a scrappy binding. Now, I did this one first. This was my test version, and I just loved how this one came out, and I decided I really wanted to try and match the colours as they kind of went around the quilt with the scrappiness that I've got left. I'm not sure I've done a particularly perfect job. It is possible to do a scrappy binding that matches beautifully. You've got to do a lot of measuring, and you've got to do it sort of as you go, and it's a little bit too much hard work for me. So I kind of did more of an approximation of where things are going. So I have ended up with the cutest binding of all these colours, and it isn't perfect, but when I go to put it on, once I've quilted this one, I'm hoping that it's sort of, how do I describe it? So I've got, this sort of pinkish colour coming down and around this corner and down to about here. So down to about here. And then I've got this next sort of colour coming across, and it's not going to end exactly at the seam. It could be a bit further, it could be a bit back. And then we're getting into this purple colour down the corner and continuing on. So I didn't try to match it. It was sort of more that in that neck of the woods, it was kind of this colour. So hopefully that will work. Now, I've still got my binding to do for my cover girl back here. So I might try and see if I can get a bit more precise. But I don't know, it's getting near Christmas. I just want to get some quilts finished so that I can have them off my to-do list. So again, it might be more an approximation of, well, we're going to get the lovely peachy apricot-y colours up in that top left-hand corner, and then it's going to go to sort of the reddy pinky colours, and then it's going to go to the purpley colours. So I don't think we need to be terribly fussy about it. After all, our binding's only, maybe half an inch at the most. So that's the plan for binding. If you've got any questions about the binding, please pop them in the comments below, or if you're in my Facebook Sewalong and Quilting group, feel free to pop them in there as well, or contact me via the website. So happy to help and give you some advice and suggestions. But I think it's a lovely way to use up a bit more of the leftover fabrics that we've got. And remember, of course, that we have quite a few of these HSTs left over from the corners of the hearts that we were making. So I haven't quite worked on a plan yet for what I'm going to do with these HSTs. I've left them untrimmed at the moment because I'm not quite sure, as I said, what I'm going to do with them. So I don't know whether I'm going to be just trimming them to the fullest size possible or whether I'm going to trim them down a bit more. But there's a lot of them here and some beautiful colours. So it might even be that I just trim them to the larger size and put them together and make a little bit of a cushion or a little bench seat or something like that. So we'll see. I'll let you know what my decision is of what I'm going to do with the leftovers. But once I've done my binding, I still do have a reasonable amount of fabric left of this collection. So trying to think again of something else. It might be that I think of something slightly bigger with my HSTs using some of this other leftover fabric as well, because I do like to have no scraps left when I finish a project. I'm not a big scrap keeper or scrappy quilter. I kind of much prefer working in a collection or a designer's sort of fabrics. Don't know why that is. Probably because I sell the fabric. I like to produce things that are from a collection so that people can buy the collection. It's a bit hard to sell things that you go, well, grab this from your stash. Your stash may not be quite the same size as mine. So I think I might think of something slightly larger to use up these last bits of this scrap so that I don't have anything to go into my scrap bins. So again, give me any thoughts you've got on what you're perhaps planning to do with your leftover bits. I think that's it, guys. I think that's our beautiful A Side of Hearts pattern for Stitch Pink for October. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me in this Sewalong. It's been wonderful, and look forward to perhaps Stitch Pink 2025. See you soon.